Today, we're addressing a question that stirs up a lot of debate, humor, stereotypes, and even frustration. Are women actually worse drivers than men? This question has existed for decades, often reduced to jokes or assumptions. But we're not here to joke. We're here to examine facts, patterns, behaviors, and data-driven evidence to understand if there's any truth to this claim, or if it's rooted more in cultural perceptions than in reality. First, let's establish what we mean when we ask whether someone is a worse driver. Are we talking about who gets into more accidents, who causes more fatalities, who breaks more traffic laws, who is more distracted, or who has higher insurance premiums? Different people mean different things when they ask this question. So to be thorough, we need to look at all of it. Crash data, traffic violations, driving behaviors, insurance statistics, and injury outcomes. Let's begin with crash data, specifically fatal crashes. Every year across countries like the United States, United Kingdom, Australia, and many others, men are significantly more likely to die in car crashes than women. In fact, men make up the overwhelming majority of fatal crash victims. In most cases, they are not only the victims, they're also the ones behind the wheel during those fatal crashes. This is partially explained by the fact that men, on average, drive more than women. They spend more hours on the road, cover more miles annually, and take longer commutes. But even when researchers account for how much people drive, by measuring crash rates per mile driven or per hour driven, men still die at significantly higher rates than women. That means the problem isn't just exposure to driving, it's something deeper, like driving behavior. Now let's look at those behaviors. Men are more likely to speed, drive under the influence of alcohol or drugs, drive aggressively, tailgate, or engage in risky maneuvers. Men are also less likely to wear seatbelts than women, even though seatbelts are one of the most effective safety tools available to drivers and passengers. These risk-taking behaviors contribute to the higher fatality rates we just mentioned. In contrast, women tend to drive more cautiously. They are less likely to speed, less likely to drive under the influence, and more likely to wear seatbelts. This doesn't mean women never drive recklessly or make mistakes, but on average, their driving patterns are more conservative, and that leads to better outcomes in terms of survival and crash avoidance. Traffic violation records tell a similar story. Men receive more citations across almost every major category. They are more likely to get pulled over for speeding, reckless driving, running red lights, DUI, and other infractions. Insurance companies use this data to assess risk, which is why, especially among younger drivers, men often pay significantly more for car insurance than women. From the insurance industry's perspective, men are higher risk drivers. These are businesses whose profits depend on being able to accurately assess risk, so this isn't just a hunch. It's based on hard data. So far, if you're looking at the most serious driving outcomes, fatal crashes, major traffic violations, and high-risk behaviors, the evidence points overwhelmingly toward men being the more dangerous drivers. But to be fully fair, we also have to explore other areas where women may not perform as well, particularly in terms of minor accidents and certain types of collisions. Some studies have found that women may be more likely to be involved in lower speed or non-fatal crashes, like parking lot fender benders or sideswipes in traffic. Women are also somewhat more likely to be involved in collisions at intersections or while making turns. These types of accidents tend to happen at lower speeds and result in property damage or minor injuries rather than fatalities. However, it's important not to misinterpret this data. Just because women are involved in more of these types of incidents does not necessarily mean they are at fault more often. In many cases, they may be the driver hit by someone else. And even when they are at fault, the accidents they're involved in are usually less severe. There's also the question of vehicle type and design. Women, on average, drive smaller vehicles than men. They are less likely to drive trucks, vans, or high-performance cars, and more likely to drive compact cars or sedans. Smaller vehicles don't offer as much crash protection as larger ones. Additionally, vehicle crash test dummies and safety designs were historically modeled on male body types, which means women are sometimes more vulnerable to injuries in the same collisions, even when they're driving safely. That's a key point. Women may face higher injury risk in certain situations, not because of their driving, but because of the cars they're in. Another factor to consider is driving context. women and men often drive under different conditions. Men are more likely to drive at night, on highways, and in high traffic or high-speed conditions. They are more likely to drive for work, including long-haul trips or time-sensitive delivery routes. These conditions increase exposure to dangerous situations. Women are more likely to use vehicles for short trips, errands, or family transport. These driving conditions carry lower inherent risk. Teen driving data also adds to the picture. Teenage boys are significantly more likely to get into fatal crashes than teenage girls. They are more likely to speed, race, or drive distracted, especially when they have friends in the car. Young male drivers in particular are overrepresented in crash and citation statistics. Insurance companies again take note of this, charging significantly higher rates for teenage male drivers. We should also touch on distracted driving. Both genders are guilty of distracted driving, whether it's texting, adjusting the GPS, eating, or dealing with children in the back seat. Some studies suggest that women may be slightly more prone to multitasking behind the wheel, especially those who have caregiving responsibilities. But on balance, men are more likely to be distracted by mobile devices while driving at high speeds or under risky conditions, which increases the danger. Now let's return to the cultural perception. Despite the overwhelming data showing that men are more likely to die in crashes, cause crashes, commit violations, and drive more aggressively, the stereotype that women are bad drivers persists in many cultures. It's often repeated as a joke, a meme, or a casual insult. But its persistence can have real effects. It can shape policy, influence driver education, and impact confidence on the road. In some countries, the bias is even embedded in law or practice. For example, in the past, some nations limited or restricted women's right to drive based on this stereotype. Thankfully, those policies are increasingly being dismantled, but the mindset often lingers. The fact that this stereotype endures even in the face of data to the contrary suggests that it has more to do with social narratives than reality. Some people argue that women are more hesitant or anxious behind the wheel. And in some cases, this is true. Women are more likely to report driving anxiety or avoidance of high-risk conditions like night driving or freeway driving. But again, this isn't the same thing as being a worse driver. In fact, cautiousness and self-awareness can be assets behind the wheel. Some of the best drivers are not the most confident. They're the most attentive and least impulsive. Let's summarize what we've covered. Men drive more miles, engage in riskier behaviors, die in crashes more frequently, receive more tickets, and pay higher insurance rates. Women may be involved in more low-severity crashes, may show more hesitation in certain driving scenarios, and may be more vulnerable to injury due to vehicle design, but they are significantly less likely to die in a crash or cause fatal accidents. From a public safety standpoint, men present a greater risk on the roads. This doesn't mean all men are reckless or all women are safe. Every individual is different, but the aggregate data across countries, age groups, and driving contexts is consistent. Men, as a group, take more driving risks and pay a higher price for those risks. So when someone asks, are women worse drivers than men? The honest answer, based on the available evidence, is no. In fact, if your definition of a good driver includes staying alive, avoiding crashes, following laws, and protecting others on the road, women actually come out ahead in nearly every category that matters. The persistence of the stereotype likely stems from a mix of old-fashioned ideas, confirmation bias, and selective anecdotes. Everyone remembers the one woman they saw struggle with parallel parking, but they forget the guy weaving through traffic at 100 miles an hour or the DUI arrest statistics that stack up year after year. It's also worth noting that as vehicles become more automated and advanced, through features like lane keeping assist, automatic braking, and adaptive cruise control, the impact of individual driver differences may become less pronounced. But even in those systems, driver behavior still plays a role. And so far, there's no evidence that women are less capable of adapting to or operating modern vehicles than men. One final thought. Safe driving isn't about gender. It's about responsibility, attention, respect for the rules, and a recognition that operating a vehicle is one of the most dangerous activities people do every day. Whether you're male or female, your safety and the safety of others depends on the choices you make behind the wheel. So instead of asking who's worse, maybe the better question is, how can we all be better?